The tower tool generates buildings using four main features: the spline that defines the footprint of the tower, the ground panel that defines the bottom, the main body panels in the middle, and the crown that defines the top of the tower. By default, these four features are chosen at random by the tower tool using the random seed. Every value of the random seed generates an entirely different tower automatically, and this goes from negative 100,000 to positive 100,000. That's 200,000 unique towers right out of the box, and that's just the beginning. If we change the spline type from random spline to spline counter, we can use this value to click through all 129 splines in the tower tool. Now, if we change the random seed, the panels still change, but the spline stays the same. One feature of the tower tool is we can decide how much randomness we want. This controls the number of floors in the tower tool. It can go up as high as you want, but the more floors you add, the slower the tower tool will run. While I'm designing, I usually keep this number around 20 for speed. You can crank it up later as high as you want once you're happy with the look of your tower. These control the number of crown and ground stories. You can have 0 if you don't want any, or you can have multiple ground or crown stories, but they will simply repeat the same story. Personally, I like one of each, but you can experiment. Here we have floors 1, 2, 3, and 4. They're all set to story 1. If we change floor 1 to story 2, the bottom floor in our tower changes. The tower tool will choose different body panels for each story in the drop-down, and you can arrange those however you like. For example, you can set them to be repeating patterns like 1, 2, 1, 2. Now if we change the random seed, we get new panels, but still the same repeating pattern. If we change the clones drop-down to random, the floors will be stacked randomly, and you can see even more options by clicking through the clone random order seed here for different randomized patterns. Again, if you click through the random seed, you get more new panels, but these panels are all constrained by the choices you made, the things you selected down here. Alright, I'm going to reset the tower tool to its default. If we open up the tower tool null, you'll see two other nulls. Leave under the hood alone because these are all the parts that make the tower tool function and you could break it. But twirl down panels and you'll see crown, story 1 through 4, and ground. See, now these are the same as these. Right now story 1 is selected, so let's look inside story 1 here. I'm going to turn the stoplight off for random panel 1 so we can see what's going on inside the building. In the on-off section, we can turn off most of the building here. We can turn off the roof, and that's the very top of the tower above the crown panel. We can also have the floors and interior walls turn on and off. Now these are important because buildings, especially buildings with a lot of glass, when you look through them you don't want to see a hollow building. You want to see that there's something there for the light and the shadows to fall onto. So we can control these here. You can control how far the walls and the floor stick out from the middle of the building with these expand sliders. I'm going to turn off floors and turn our panels back on for a moment. Instead of using the floors checkbox, we can use interfloor. What this does is increase the thickness between floors. By default, the thickness is set to 0, but drag it up to 100 and you can see the building get taller without actually adding extra stories to it. We're just increasing the distance between floors and filling it in with geometry. Interfloor expand controls how far this sticks out away from the building. Now these two sliders have a limit, but you can increase the values beyond the limit of the sliders. The thing to keep in mind is when you're not using interfloor, the interfloor thickness has to be set to 0 or you'll get these gaps between the floors, and you don't want that. So when you're done using interfloor, remember to set this to 0. If we click on random panel 1, we can see what panel has been selected by the random seed. Here it's walk up 4. This is where our huge library of panels comes in. In the content browser, go to main panels and you can see all 370 panels. If we scroll down, we can find the walk up panels, and you can see walk up 4 is the same panel that's being used to make our tower right now. Let's grab some Wellington panels and drag them into our scene. If we place them in the Story 1 cloner, they will get added to our tower. Now we can change the order of these panels, and we see that change reflected in our tower here. We don't want to delete this random panel 1 instance because it'll break our Espresso tag. Instead, let's move it up here into hide so it doesn't show up in our tower. Now whatever we do with these panels here will be reflected in the Story 1 selection. You can mix all these different panels together to get different looks. Most of these panels work really well with most of the other panels. Not every panel works perfectly with every other panel because there are 370 of them, but mostly they work really well together, and you can get some really interesting looks this way.